The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base as Sarah Martinez walked toward the armory. Her boots clicked against the concrete with determination. 3 months of training had led to this moment. Today, she would finally get her weapon assignment. Colonel James Harrison stood behind the metal counter, his weathered face showing years of military service. His gray hair was perfectly trimmed, and his uniform bore the marks of countless battles. He had seen hundreds of young soldiers walk through these doors, but something about Sarah was different. "I need a weapon, sir," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the nervousness she felt inside. The colonel looked up from his paperwork. His dark eyes studied her carefully. Sarah was smaller than most soldiers, standing barely 5 feet 4 inches tall. Her auburn hair was pulled back in regulation style, and her green eyes held a fire that couldn't be taught. "What kind of weapon are you looking for, soldier?" the colonel asked. "Something that will make me effective in combat, sir. Something that will help me protect my unit and complete our missions." The colonel set down his pen and walked around the counter. He moved slowly, like a man carrying the weight of many decisions. Behind him, rows of rifles and pistols lined the walls. Each weapon had its purpose, its story. "Tell me about your training scores," he said. Sarah straightened her shoulders. "Top of my class in marksmanship, sir. Excellent ratings in hand-to-hand combat. I scored highest in tactical thinking exercises. And what do you think makes a good soldier, Martinez?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She had expected to discuss weapon specifications, not philosophy. But she answered honestly. "Courage, sir. The ability to make hard decisions under pressure. Loyalty to your team and your mission." The colonel nodded slowly. He walked to a locked cabinet in the corner of the armory. Sarah had never seen this cabinet open before. It was different from the others, made of black metal with symbols she didn't recognize. "There are weapons, Martinez, and then there are weapons," the colonel said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Some are made of steel and gunpowder. Others are made of something much more powerful." He turned a complex combination lock. The cabinet door opened with a soft click. Inside, Sarah could see something that made her breath catch in her throat. It wasn't a rifle or a pistol. It was a curved blade, almost 2 feet long, with a handle wrapped in black leather. The metal seemed to shimmer, even in the dim light of the armory. "This weapon has a history, soldier. It has chosen its wielders carefully throughout the years. Each person who has carried it has faced impossible odds and emerged victorious." Sarah stared at the blade. Something about it called to her, like a voice she couldn't quite hear but somehow understood. "What is it called, sir?" The colonel's eyes met hers. In them, she saw respect, concern, and something that might have been fear. "The Talon," he whispered, "and according to legend, she alone can command it." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, though she couldn't explain why. The colonel carefully lifted the weapon from its resting place. As his hands touched the handle, Sarah noticed his fingers trembled slightly. "This isn't just about having a weapon, Martinez. This is about accepting a responsibility that will change your life forever. The Talon doesn't just belong to its wielder. In many ways, the wielder belongs to it." Sarah looked at the blade, then back at the colonel's serious face. Around them, the armory felt different somehow, as if the very air had changed. The other weapons on the walls seemed ordinary now, almost toy-like, compared to what the colonel held in his hands. "I don't understand, sir. How can a weapon choose someone?" The colonel moved closer. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet that Sarah had to lean in to hear him. "3 months ago, when you first arrived for training, something unusual happened. Do you remember your first night on base?" Sarah thought back. She remembered feeling restless, unable to sleep. She had walked around the base grounds, eventually finding herself standing outside the armory building. She had felt drawn to it, though she couldn't explain why. "You stood outside this building for 2 hours that night," the colonel continued. "The security cameras recorded it. You just stood there, looking up at these windows. When the guards approached you, you said you heard something calling to you." The memory came flooding back. Sarah had forgotten about that night, dismissing it as nervousness about starting military training. But now, looking at the Talon, she remembered the feeling clearly. Something had been calling to her. The Talon has been waiting, the colonel said. For 73 years, it has waited in that cabinet. The last person to wield it was my grandfather, Colonel Thomas Harrison. He carried it through World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. When he died, he made me promise to keep it safe until the right person came along. The colonel extended the weapon toward Sarah. He told me I would know when that person arrived. He said the Talon itself would choose them. Sarah reached out slowly. The moment her fingers touched the leather-wrapped handle, she felt a surge of energy unlike anything she had ever experienced. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. Images flashed through her mind, scenes of battles, of soldiers fighting against impossible odds, of victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. "You're connecting with its history," the colonel explained. "Every person who has wielded the Talon leaves part of themselves in it. Their knowledge, their experience, their strength becomes part of the weapon. And now, part of you." Sarah gripped the handle more firmly. The vision stopped, but she could still feel something new inside her mind. It was like having access to a library of combat knowledge she had never learned. She knew techniques she had never been taught, strategies she had never studied. "This is impossible," she said, though even as she spoke, she knew it was real. The colonel smiled for the first time since she had entered the armory. "My grandfather used to say that impossible things happen when impossible people are willing to accept them." Sarah lifted the blade, testing its weight. It felt perfectly balanced, as if it had been made specifically for her hand. The metal was warm to the touch, and she could swear she felt it pulse like a heartbeat. "What am I supposed to do with it?" "Your unit ships out next week for a classified mission," the colonel said. "Intelligence suggests it will be dangerous. More dangerous than anything a new soldier should face. But with the Talon, you won't be just any soldier." He walked back to his desk and picked up a sealed envelope. "These are your new orders. You'll be joining an elite squad for a rescue mission behind enemy lines. Without the Talon, I would never have recommended you for such an assignment. With it, you might be their best hope for success." Sarah stared at the envelope, then at the weapon in her hands. Everything was happening so fast. This morning she had been a newly trained soldier, hoping to get a standard rifle. Now she was holding a legendary blade and receiving orders for a dangerous mission. "Colonel, I'm not sure I'm ready for this." "None of us ever are," he replied. "But ready or not, some things must be done." Sarah looked around the armory one more time. The normal weapons on the walls seemed to mock her now. Standard-issue rifles and pistols for standard soldiers. But she wasn't standard, was she? The Talon had chosen her, somehow recognizing something in her that she didn't even know existed. "What happened to the other people who carried it?" she asked. The colonel's expression grew somber. "Some lived long, honorable lives. Others died in service to their country. But all of them made a difference. All of them saved lives that couldn't have been saved any other way." Sarah nodded slowly. She thought about her reasons for joining the military in the first place. Her younger brother had been killed in a terrorist attack 3 years ago. She had enlisted hoping to prevent other families from experiencing that kind of loss. Maybe this was her chance to truly make that difference. "I'll take it," she said finally. The colonel extended his hand, and Sarah shook it firmly. "Then God help you, soldier. And God help the enemies who stand in your way." As Sarah walked out of the armory, the Talon secured in a special sheath the colonel had provided, she felt the weight of destiny on her shoulders. Behind her, Colonel Harrison watched through the window. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. "It's done," he said when the call connected. "The Talon has found its new wielder. Sarah Martinez will be ready for the mission." The voice on the other end was cold and efficient. "Good. She'll need to be. What we haven't told her yet is that this isn't just a rescue mission. It's the beginning of something much larger, and she's going to be at the center of it all." The colonel hung up the phone and sat down heavily in his chair. He had given Sarah the weapon, but he hadn't told her everything. He couldn't tell her that the rescue mission was just the first test. that if she succeeded, she would be drawn into a conflict that had been brewing for decades, that the Talon wasn't just a weapon, but a key to unlocking secrets that could change the balance of power in the world. Outside, Sarah continued walking toward her barracks, unaware that her life had just taken a turn toward a destiny she couldn't possibly imagine. The Talon pulsed gently against her side, as if it too was preparing for what was to come. In the distance, a black sedan pulled away from the base. Inside, men in expensive suits made phone calls and checked encrypted messages. The wheels of a much larger plan were already in motion, and Sarah Martinez had just become its most important piece. The sun climbed higher in the sky as the base continued its daily routine. Soldiers trained, officers planned, and mechanics maintained equipment. But none of them knew that everything was about to change, that a young woman with an ancient weapon was about to step into a world where the line between legend and reality no longer existed. Sarah reached her barracks and sat on her bunk. She carefully removed the Talon from its sheath and studied it in the afternoon light. The metal surface was covered in intricate engravings that seemed to shift and move as she looked at them. At the base of the blade, she could make out words in a language she didn't recognize. She was so focused on the weapon that she almost missed the soft knock on her door. Standing in the doorway was Lieutenant Rebecca Chen, her training instructor. "Martinez, I need to speak with you." Sarah quickly sheathed the weapon, but she could tell from the lieutenant's expression that she had seen it. "That's not standard issue," Lieutenant Chen said, closing the door behind her. "No, ma'am. Colonel Harrison gave it to me this morning." Lieutenant Chen sat on the opposite bunk. Her usual stern expression had been replaced by something Sarah couldn't quite identify. Concern? Fear? "Sarah, there are things you need to know before you leave for your mission. Things the colonel couldn't tell you in the armory." Lieutenant Chen looked around the barracks room before speaking. Her dark eyes held secrets that Sarah could sense but not understand. The afternoon light streaming through the windows seemed to dim as the conversation grew serious. "The mission you're being sent on isn't what they've told you," Lieutenant Chen began. "Yes, it's a rescue operation. But the person you're rescuing isn't just any prisoner. Dr. Elena Vasquez was working on something called Project Nightfall when she was captured 3 weeks ago." Sarah listened carefully, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on the Talon's handle. Even through the sheath, she could feel the weapon's warmth. "What kind of project?" Sarah asked. She was studying ancient weapons. "Weapons like the one you're now carrying. The military has been searching for artifacts like the Talon for decades, but most of what they found were replicas or damaged pieces. Dr. Vasquez discovered that these weapons were part of a larger system, connected in ways we don't fully understand." Lieutenant Chen stood up and walked to the window. Outside, soldiers continued their training exercises, unaware of the conversation taking place above them. "The people who captured Dr. Vasquez aren't ordinary terrorists or enemy soldiers. They call themselves the Shadow Collective, and they've been hunting these weapons for over a century. They have at least 3 of them already." Sarah felt a chill run through her. 3 weapons like this one? Similar, but not identical. Each weapon has its own personality, its own strengths. The Talon is known for precision and speed. The others have different abilities. Together, they're incredibly powerful. Apart, they're still formidable, but limited. Lieutenant Chen returned to sit across from Sarah. "The Shadow Collective believes that if they can gather all 7 weapons, they can control something much larger, something that could shift the balance of power in the world." 7 weapons total? According to Dr. Vasquez's research, yes, 3 are with the Shadow Collective. You now have the 4th. The locations of the other 3 are unknown. But Dr. Vasquez was close to finding them when she was captured. Sarah absorbed this information slowly. What had started as a simple weapon assignment was becoming something much more complex and dangerous. "Why wasn't I told this from the beginning?" "Because," Lieutenant Chen said softly, "they needed to be sure the Talon would accept you first. These weapons don't work for just anyone. They choose their wielders based on criteria we don't fully understand. If the Talon had rejected you, there would have been no point in involving you in this larger conflict." Sarah drew the weapon partially from its sheath. In the afternoon light, The engravings seemed more visible, more alive. She could make out shapes that looked like birds of prey, their talons extended as if ready to strike. What exactly am I supposed to do? Your mission is to infiltrate the Shadow Collective's stronghold and rescue Dr. Vasquez. But while you're there, you'll also need to gather intelligence about the other weapons and their capabilities. Most importantly, you need to prevent them from learning too much about the Talon. Lieutenant Chen reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device that looked like a modified smartphone. This contains everything we know about the Shadow Collective's base location, their security measures, and the layout of the building where Dr. Plains made Vasquez is being held. Sarah took the device and scrolled through the information. The stronghold was located in a remote mountain region, accessible only by helicopter or a dangerous climb through rocky terrain. The building itself was a converted monastery, its ancient walls hiding modern security equipment. How many people are in my unit for this mission? 4 others, all experienced soldiers. But Sarah, you need to understand something important. They don't know about the Talon's true nature. As far as they're concerned, you're the team's close combat specialist, armed with an unusual but conventional blade. This surprised Sarah. Why the secrecy? Because trust is earned, not given. The fewer people who know about the weapon's true capabilities, the safer everyone is. If the mission goes wrong and team members are captured, they can't reveal what they don't know. Lieutenant Chen stood to leave, then turned back. There's one more thing. The Shadow Collective has ways of detecting these weapons when they're active. The Talon will mask its presence most of the time. But when you use its full power, they'll know you're there. What do you mean by full power? You'll understand when the time comes. The weapon will guide you. But be careful. Once you unleash its true capabilities, there's no hiding what you are. After Lieutenant Chen left, Sarah spent the rest of the day studying the mission files and preparing her equipment. The target building was indeed formidable, with multiple guard posts, electronic surveillance, and narrow corridors that could easily become death traps. As evening approached, Sarah made her way to the base's training facility. She wanted to practice with the Talon, to understand its balance and capabilities before the mission began. The facility was empty at this hour, giving her privacy to experiment. She began with basic sword forms, movements she had learned during her training, but as she worked with the Talon, she found herself performing techniques she had never been taught. The weapon seemed to guide her hands, showing her more efficient ways to strike, better angles for defense. After an hour of practice, Sarah was breathing hard, but felt more connected to the weapon than ever. She was about to stop when she heard footsteps approaching. A figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the training area. It was Master Sergeant David Torres, one of the soldiers assigned to her mission team. He was a veteran with over 15 years of service, known for his calm demeanor and tactical expertise. But as he approached, Sarah could see surprise in his eyes. "That's some impressive swordwork, Martinez," he said. "Where did you learn those techniques?" Sarah hesitated. She couldn't explain that the weapon itself was teaching her. "I've been studying various fighting styles in my spare time, Sergeant." Torres nodded, but his expression remained curious. "Mind if I ask where you got that blade? I've never seen anything quite like it. It was issued to me this morning by Colonel Harrison. Interesting choice for a close combat weapon. Most soldiers prefer something more conventional." Torres moved closer, studying the Talon without touching it. "Those engravings are remarkable. Almost looks like they're moving in this light." Sarah quickly sheathed the weapon. "Just decorative, I think. Maybe." Torres didn't sound convinced. "Well, you should get some rest. We deploy at 0500 hours tomorrow. It's going to be a long day." As Torres walked away, Sarah realized that keeping the Talon's secret was going to be more difficult than she had anticipated. Her team members were experienced soldiers, trained to notice details and ask questions. The next morning arrived with gray clouds and a cold wind that seemed to carry a sense of foreboding. Sarah joined her team at the helicopter pad, where their transportation waited. Besides Torres, there was Corporal Lisa Park, a communications specialist, and Private First Class Marcus Johnson, their explosives expert. The team leader was Captain Robert Mitchell, a stern man with ice-blue eyes, who spoke only when necessary. As they flew toward the target area, Captain Mitchell briefed them on the mission timeline. They would land 2 miles from the stronghold and approach on foot under cover of darkness. The rescue needed to be completed within 6 hours before the Shadow Collective's reinforcements could arrive. "Remember," Mitchell said over the helicopter's noise, "Dr. Vasquez is our primary objective. Everything else is secondary. We go in, get her, and get out. No heroics, no unnecessary risks." Sarah nodded along with the others, but she knew her mission was more complex than the captain realized. She would need to balance the team's safety with her own secret objectives. As they flew deeper into the mountains, Sarah felt the Talon pulse against her side. Through the helicopter's window, she could see the target building in the distance, its dark walls rising from the rocky landscape like a fortress from another time. Somewhere inside those walls, Dr. Vasquez was waiting. But Sarah was beginning to understand that rescuing her was just the beginning of something much larger. The helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone. Below them, the mountain terrain looked harsh and unforgiving. Sarah checked her equipment one final time, making sure the Talon was secure but accessible. In a few hours, she would discover whether the weapon had truly chosen her or whether she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Captain Mitchell's voice came through their headsets. 2 minutes to landing. Remember your training. Trust your teammates. And let's bring Dr. Vasquez home." But as the helicopter touched down and the team prepared to begin their approach to the stronghold, none of them knew that they were walking into a trap that had been set specifically for them. The Shadow Collective had been expecting someone to come for Dr. Vasquez. They had been waiting for the Talon to reveal itself. In the ancient monastery that served as their headquarters, men in dark robes watched monitors that showed the helicopter's landing. In the center of their group stood a tall figure whose face was hidden by a deep hood. In his hands, he held a weapon similar to the Talon, but darker, its blade seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. "She has come," he whispered to his followers. "The fourth weapon reveals itself at last. Tonight, we will add it to our collection, and we will be one step closer to awakening the true power that has slept for centuries." The figure raised his weapon, and the other robed figures bowed their heads in acknowledgement. In the depths of the monastery, Dr. Vasquez sat in her cell, unaware that her rescue was about to begin. But she was also unaware that her rescuers were walking into a confrontation that would determine the fate of powers far greater than any of them could imagine. The mountain wind howled through the peaks as Sarah and her team began their careful approach toward the stronghold. With each step, the Talon seemed to grow warmer against her side, as if it too could sense what was waiting ahead. The weapon that had chosen her was about to face its first real test, and Sarah was beginning to understand that everything she thought she knew about warfare was about to change forever. The approach to the monastery took 3 hours through treacherous mountain terrain. Sarah and her team moved silently through the darkness, using night vision equipment to navigate between the rocky outcroppings. The building loomed ahead of them, its ancient stone seeming to absorb the moonlight. Captain Mitchell held up his hand, signaling the team to stop. They were now within 500 meters of their target. Through her scope, Sarah could see guards patrolling the outer walls, their movements too regular to be natural. These weren't ordinary sentries. "Something's wrong," Corporal Park whispered into her microphone. "I'm not picking up any radio chatter from the guards. Usually there's constant communication." Master Sergeant Torres nodded grimly. "They're expecting us. This feels like a trap." Captain Mitchell studied the building through his binoculars. "Maybe, but we have our orders. Dr. Vasquez is in there, and we're going to get her out." Sarah felt the Talon pulse against her side, stronger than before. The weapon seemed to be warning her about something, but she couldn't understand what. As they moved closer to the monastery, she began to feel a strange sensation, as if the air itself was charged with electricity. "Captain," she whispered, "I think we should reconsider our approach. Something doesn't feel right about this place." Mitchell turned to look at her. In the green glow of their night vision equipment, his expression was hard to read. "What kind of feeling, Martinez?" Sarah struggled to explain without revealing the Talon's true nature. "Just instinct, sir. The guards aren't behaving normally, And the building itself seems different. Different how? Before Sarah could answer, Private Johnson's voice came through their headsets, tight with alarm. Movement on the walls. Multiple targets. Moving fast. Sarah looked up to see shapes moving across the monastery's battlements. But these weren't normal guard movements. The figures were leaping from wall to wall with impossible speed and agility, covering distances that should have required climbing equipment. "What the hell are those?" Torres muttered. The Talon suddenly grew hot against Sarah's side, and she felt a surge of information flow into her mind. Images and knowledge that weren't hers showed her the truth about what they were facing. The Shadow Collective weren't just people with ancient weapons, they had been changed by those weapons, enhanced beyond normal human capabilities. "We need to move, now," Sarah said urgently. "They know we're here, and they're not entirely human anymore." Captain Mitchell stared at her. "What are you talking about, Martinez?" Before she could answer, the monastery's walls erupted with activity. Dozens of dark figures poured over the battlements, moving with inhuman speed toward their position. Some carried weapons that glowed with the same dark energy Sarah had felt from the Talon, but cold and predatory. "Contact!" Torres shouted, opening fire with his rifle. The battle erupted around them. Sarah drew the Talon as the first attackers reached their position. The moment her hand gripped the handle, everything changed. The world slowed down around her, and she could see the movements of their enemies as clearly as if they were walking instead of running. The first Shadow Collective warrior reached her position with a curved blade raised high. Sarah moved without thinking, the Talon guiding her movements. She ducked under his swing and struck upward with her own weapon. The blade cut through his armor as if it were paper, and the man collapsed with a look of shock on his face. "Martinez, how did you?" Captain Mitchell's words were cut short as 3 more attackers surrounded him. Sarah felt the Talon's power flowing through her. She could sense her teammates' positions without looking, could predict where the next attacks would come from. She moved through the battlefield like a dancer, the ancient weapons singing through the air as it cut down enemy after enemy. But even with the Talon's power, they were outnumbered. For every attacker Sarah defeated, 2 more seemed to take their place. Corporal Park was wounded, and Private Johnson was running low on ammunition. "We need to get inside the building," Sarah called out. "We're too exposed out here." The team fought their way toward the monastery's main entrance, with Sarah clearing a path using the Talon's devastating effectiveness. As they reached the heavy wooden doors, she could feel something else calling to her from within the building. Another weapon, similar to her own but different in some fundamental way. Captain Mitchell kicked open the doors, and they rushed inside. The interior of the monastery was a maze of narrow corridors and small chambers, lit by flickering torches that cast dancing shadows on the stone walls. The ancient religious artwork had been defaced and replaced with symbols Sarah didn't recognize but somehow understood. They were markings of power, designed to channel and focus the energy of the weapons the Shadow Collective possessed. "Dr. Vasquez should be in the lower levels," Torres said, consulting his map. "But this place is bigger than the intelligence report suggested." As they moved deeper into the building, Sarah began to hear something that made her blood run cold. It was a voice, speaking in a language she had never heard but somehow understood. The words seemed to be calling to the Talon, trying to influence it, to turn it against her. "Do you hear that?" she asked her teammates. They all shook their heads. The voice was meant for her alone, or rather, for the weapon she carried. They descended a stone staircase that spiraled down into the depths of the monastery. With each step, the voice grew louder, more insistent. Sarah felt the Talon's response, a resistance that seemed to strengthen her own will against whatever was trying to influence them. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a long corridor lined with cells. In the 3rd cell from the end, they discovered Dr. Elena Vasquez. She was a small woman in her 50s, with gray hair and intelligent brown eyes that lit up when she saw them approaching. "Thank God," she whispered as Captain Mitchell worked on the lock of her cell. "But you shouldn't have come. This is a trap. They've been waiting for someone with one of the weapons." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew. Dr. Vasquez looked directly at her, and Sarah realized the scientist could somehow sense the Talon. "You have it, don't you?" One of the original 7. They can feel it too, and they're coming. As if summoned by her words, footsteps echoed through the corridor above them. But these weren't the running steps of ordinary soldiers. They were slow, deliberate, filled with confidence. "There's another way out," Dr. Vasquez said quickly as Mitchell freed her from the cell. "Through the old catacombs. But we need to move fast." She led them through a hidden door at the far end of the corridor. Beyond it lay a tunnel that had been carved from the living rock centuries ago. As they moved through the narrow passage, Dr. Vasquez explained what she had learned during her captivity. "The weapons aren't just tools," she said breathlessly as they half ran through the tunnel. "They're keys. Each one unlocks a portion of something much larger. The Shadow Collective has been searching for them because they believe that together, all 7 weapons can awaken an ancient power source." "What kind of power source?" Captain Mitchell asked. "Something that was buried here thousands of years ago. Something that the weapons were originally designed to control and contain." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold stone around them. "You're saying we've been carrying around keys to something dangerous?" "Not just dangerous, Dr. Vasquez replied. "Potentially catastrophic. The ancient texts I've studied suggest that this power source could reshape the fundamental nature of reality itself. In the wrong hands, it could end civilization as we know it." The tunnel emerged into a natural cave system that led back toward the surface. But as they climbed toward the exit, Sarah heard the voice again, louder and more compelling than before. This time, it wasn't just trying to influence the Talon. It was trying to call to whatever was buried beneath the monastery. "We need to destroy this place," Sarah said suddenly. "Whatever's down there, we can't let them wake it up." Private Johnson nodded and reached for his explosives pack. "I can bring down the whole mountain if necessary." But before he could begin setting charges, the cave around them began to glow with an eerie light. The voice Sarah had been hearing became audible to everyone, speaking words in the ancient language that seemed to vibrate through the stone itself. "Too late," Dr. Vasquez whispered. "They're beginning the awakening ceremony." The ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Somewhere far below them, something was stirring that had slept for millennia. Sarah felt the Talon grow burning hot against her side, responding to whatever power was being awakened in the depths. "The weapons are connected," Dr. Vasquez explained as they climbed faster toward the surface. "When one of them is near the power source, all of them become more active. The Shadow Collective is using their 3 weapons to try to wake up what's buried here." They emerged from the cave system to find themselves on the far side of the mountain from where they had started. Behind them, the monastery was glowing with unnatural light, and the air around it shimmered, as if reality itself was becoming unstable. "Johnson, can you target the building from here?" Captain Mitchell asked. "Yes, sir. But it'll take all the explosives we have." Sarah drew the Talon and felt its power flowing through her more strongly than ever before. She could sense the other weapons now, their locations within the monastery, and the malevolent intelligence that was guiding their wielders. "Wait," she said. "There might be another way." She closed her eyes and let the Talon's accumulated knowledge flow through her mind. Images of past wielders, their battles, their victories and defeats, and among those memories, she found what she was looking for. A technique that had been used only once before, by the weapon's first carrier, in a situation very much like this one. "The weapons can be turned against each other," she said. "If I can get close enough to the other 3, the Talon can disrupt whatever they're trying to do." "That's suicide," Torres protested. "You'd be walking right into their stronghold while they're at full power." Sarah looked back at the glowing monastery. The building was beginning to crack, unable to contain the forces being unleashed within it. Whatever was buried beneath it was almost awake. "Maybe," she said. "But it's the only chance we have to stop this." She turned to Captain Mitchell. "Get Dr. Vasquez to safety. Call for extraction and warn headquarters about what's happening here. If I don't make it back, they need to know about the weapons and what the Shadow Collective is trying to do." Before any of them could protest further, Sarah was running back toward the monastery. The Talon guided her steps, showing her the safest path through the unstable terrain. As she approached the building, she could see the 3 Shadow Collective leaders standing on the highest tower, their weapons raised toward the sky. The final confrontation was about to begin, and Sarah knew that everything would depend on whether the Talon had truly chosen her, or whether she was about to discover that some powers were too great for any one person to control. The weapon pulsed with warmth against her side, ready for whatever was to come. Behind her, Captain Mitchell spoke into his radio, calling for immediate evacuation and backup, but they all knew that by the time help arrived, the fate of the world might already be decided by a young soldier and an ancient weapon, standing alone against forces that had been sleeping since the dawn of civilization. The mountain itself seemed to hold its breath as Sarah approached the monastery, the Talon's blade gleaming in the unnatural light that poured from every window and crack in the ancient stone. Whatever happened next would determine whether the power buried beneath their feet would serve humanity or destroy it. And it all depended on whether she alone could truly command the Talon, or whether it would command her.